Welcome to the Fit Affiliate podcast, where we talk about behavior and behavior-based conversations as they relate to CrossFit affiliate owners and coaches. My name's Lisa Hetherington, and I'm your co-host. Sitting alongside me are Tony and Chuck, the founders of Fit Affiliate. And welcome back to another episode of the Fit Affiliate podcast. And here I am, as usual, sitting with the ever awesome Tony and Chuck. We've got a brand new clean-shaven Chuck today, which is good for the soul. How are you, gentlemen?
We got a half a Chuck. It's a half a Chuck.
Yeah. And Tony, you and I are just the same. So Chuck can bring the new
Lisa
for us.
Still got her beard. Lisa's beard.
And so it begins. I thought today we would have a little bit of a chat about affiliate owners and coaches creating identity as and considering themselves entrepreneurs, and rather than just a coach or just a gym owner, which can kind of limit their potential to do even greater things. So yeah, I thought that was something interesting that we could discuss today for our loyal following that we have.
I'm actually more curious. I think we should explore how you come about things that are of particular interest to make us talk about for the next hour. So why did you think that was the thing that we should talk about this week?
Well, I think it's interesting with having been through the process myself of calling myself just a coach or just an affiliate owner or I just own a gym. When you're exposed through coaching and the various programs we've got to, you actually are an entrepreneur that you get to control your own income. You get to create revenue out of thin air should you choose to, and you get to pursue opportunities to create things and develop things because you've got that freedom. And I think a lot of that is overlooked. And this week in the email that goes out to our subscribers was, why entrepreneurs need coaches. And it got me thinking about affiliate owners and coaches creating that identity that they are actually more than just a. That's where I got the inspiration.
I don't know as though you actually answered my question, Lisa, but I'm going to let you off the hook on this one because you definitely told me why you think other people need to hear this, but I was curious why you thought identity should actually matter. But
it's a good reminder for all of us.
It's all good. I mean, you do this to us every single time, and there's so much to unpack. And like you hit us with this brief synopsis that we want to talk about, but then it forces us to be like, well, we got to go way, way back. I think the first thing that has to be understood is really truly the power of identity to begin with. And there's a fundamental flaw, I think, that exists in pretty much most people, if not all of us, in how we perceive or believe that we come about an identity, right? And so what I mean by that is that most people, I think, have it backwards in that they believe that identity will come to them upon the success or the results or the achievement of whatever X, Y, and Z is, right? So like, I'll become a carpenter when I'm a carpenter, right? But truly identity is a choice, right? You have to choose that identity. And the reason why that's important, I think, in this conversation is that what we're talking about here is essentially choosing a defeatist identity of sorts, right? Like I'm just a coach of some sorts. But I don't know anybody who does anything to just do the basic part of it. So really what we're saying is that we're choosing an identity of settling before we've even made the attempt at excelling. And that part, I think, is where it gets really interesting, at least to us, as people who have, helped people on their journey of becoming better coaches. Why would you get into this thing to quote unquote just be a coach, right? So like I know that that's not the case because I've spent so much time with so many developing coaches that they're in pursuit of something, but they're waiting until they complete something or accomplish something or accumulate something, I think, in order for them to assign themselves the identity. But it just doesn't work that way, right? Like because I am is what I'll become is really the way identity works. And I think that has to start there, right? Because like saying you're just a coach is going to basically just ensure that you are literally quote unquote just a coach. But we got to talk about what the identity of a coach is and what the definition of a coach is. But I think that that's the first most important part to talk about. It's like, when does identity become a thing, right? Do we get to choose it or does it decide for us?
I think we can consciously decide to choose it for sure, or we can just let it happen. But I think there's more power if we choose who we want to be and who we are.
Well, I mean, I suppose that it sounds a very woo-woo sort of thing, right? It's like one of those power of manifestation things where it's like I'm amazing, so I'm going to, I'm going to tell myself that I'm amazing. And it's a little bit of that, I suppose. But I think one of the ways that I kind of stumbled onto this realization was through the process of a photographer, as somebody who takes photos. I've never considered myself a photographer, but because I take photos, people would consider me a photographer. But at what point does somebody become a photographer? Or what point are they just somebody who takes pictures? Right. And so identity is something that's really just honestly thrown about. It's a thing that people give to you, they share with you, and you can accept it or you can deny it. It doesn't really matter. But if that's the case, if it can be given to you so easily, why can't you just create it yourself? Right. Like, I think that that's the first basic part of it.
And I think
And
like,
for every,
to our audience, it's important that like they reflect that like you've done this before and you've been asked this before, but it wasn't through the lens of entrepreneur. It was like, at what point am I a CrossFitter? Like, when do I get to call myself a CrossFitter? Be like, I mean, are you doing the thing? Cool. We're done here. And that seems fucking arrogantly simple on the back side of it, but like it is no less true that you have the ability to choose and assume any identity you want at any point that you want.
Yeah, and it's a powerful shift when you can make that realization that you can choose to be something and essentially, set your course for where you want to go.
Well, that's just the framework, right? That's the foundation of the conversation, is that like if you can decide where you're going, you can already basically ensure that you're on the right trajectory. And the reason it's important to start there is because really what we're talking about here is broke coaches, right? Like, let's be honest, that's actually what you're talking about, is like coaches who have chosen a career field but has yet to produce an actual career. And so they're waiting for some degree of a success or acceptance or accomplishment for them to be like, yes, finally, I'm not just a coach. Now I'm a coach, right? But like, it's never going to happen until you decide that like, no, I'm awesome because I am awesome, because you obviously all engage in probably one of the coolest jobs on the planet. Like, you have to take the identity first. It's never going to come to you. No one's going to give it to you. You're not going to be given permission. You're not going to be crowned. You're not going to be, knighted. Like, you have to choose the identity first, because before you're ever going to make any money at this thing, you have to accept that like, this is not just the thing that you do because you liked doing the thing. And so you decided to become the coach, right? Like, when you decided that I want to be a coach, you basically stepped into greatness. Now it's really kind of time for you to step up to that call. And that part's scary, I think. And maybe that's where the defeatist notion comes from. It's a little easier to be like, I'm just a coach. And then it means like, don't actually watch me, watch the other coaches.
Yeah, it can give you that out and that psychological out anyway, that you don't have to be more or have any expectations if you don't want to.
Yeah, and I think that, outside of like, okay, so yes, choose identity. Yes, like coach is a powerful identity to choose. So is the other side of it. And, we look at gym owners. And then the breakdown kind of starts to happen because like Tony was saying, most of the coaches, the issue for them with the identity is like they're broke. And so they don't feel like they're valuable because they don't have evidence that they're valuable, but they won't get that evidence until they make that decision. But they think the ascension into a gym owner, they're like, well, it's just more people, more transactions, bigger dollars. Like, that is the path that will allow me to step into the identity that like I so much so would like to have. And more often than not, we find that that is not the case. And so I'd be curious, this would be a fun one, like for the audience. And I would love anybody that wants to DM, email, comment. How do you see the difference between a business owner and an entrepreneur? How do you see the difference between a subcontractor, a business owner, and an entrepreneur? And so if we can, and I don't want to like speak to it too much because that corrupts the entire experiment, but I think that those are important things to look at very differently. Understanding that the entrepreneurial thread runs through all of them, that is the most powerful to pull on, but most people never get the opportunity to successfully execute on the entrepreneur thread because they don't even know that it really exists. They would equate like being a business owner and being an entrepreneur the same thing. And I would argue very much so that they are very, very different. But we'll keep this to entrepreneurship, and maybe that would be a good follow-up in the future.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
if you don't have markers for what an identity would constitute, it's very difficult to assume that identity. We all had the ability to self-identify and step into, CrossFitters doing CrossFit because somebody laid out what exactly that meant. And maybe that's a big struggle for a lot of people to be able to identify as an entrepreneur and execute successfully because they're like, I don't even know what the fuck that really actually means. So if you're today years old, when you stumbled across that, like that would be a really powerful thing to spend a little bit of time like thinking about and researching. And I would argue, we'll just plan this as a follow-up. I would argue that being a business owner does not make you an entrepreneur.
Well, I mean, I would never have considered myself as an entrepreneur as when I first started in the gym, and it was only when I started, mixing with like our mastermind group that we had, or other high level people, and you get a light shone on that, and you go, oh, and you create things, and then you actually start to think about things a little bit differently, and your potential to create opportunities.
Now
So
we're
it's
just the audience. Just now you're going to corrupt the whole experiment that Chuck just posed to everybody.
You heard the word too. It's funny, man.
Yeah.
Like spent so much time together. You heard the word that like exists.
Yeah.
And I can see it on your face. But yeah, there's a lot of truth in like Lisa's last statement. And so,
well, it's the whole people like us do things like this, isn't it? It's who are you attaching to and identifying with and spending time with.
And so maybe the title that's like mocked up for the episode of like why affiliate owners and coaches are entrepreneurs, maybe like that's a little bit of a misnomer, and why they would be better served in their roles if they saw themselves as entrepreneurs. If you just own an affiliate, or if you just are a coach, then like, cool. What does that mean to you? And do you understand your ability and your responsibility to be able to change that identity to serve your wants and needs? And I think that's a really powerful piece of it, is like so many people are, trapped in a coach role, trapped in an affiliate owner role. Like, okay, well, what are you doing to make it better? And they're like, I don't know. I'm doing the thing. Be like, well, are you really exploring it? Are you seeking to improve it? Are you seeking problem solutions, arbitrage opportunities, like, or are you just an instructor or a trainer following somebody else's script? Are you a business owner? Okay, cool. Well, are you a franchisee? Are you a licensee? Or did you really do something that is special and different? All of these things are not created equal. And so, yeah, like why should affiliate owners and coaches consider themselves and act as entrepreneurs? Because that is where you actually have the ability to solve your problems.
I think a lot of people have the misconception, and I was guilty of it too, that, an entrepreneur is someone like, an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates or Steve Jobs that are creating something.
Everybody throws that damn word around now, right? I mean,
they are. They're just like the fucking Michael Jordans of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's no different than really anything. That simple word has now become ruined, much like unprecedented became ruined during the time that will not be named, because apparently we have an amnesty on that now. But so entrepreneurs are great. I think that they're absolutely nailed it. But back to the kind of the root of it, it's like where I think this stems from in a lot of situations is that yes, people do not think entrepreneurially. They do not think outside of the lens of like pro forma or perfunctory, and that they have a job to do and they must do the job. But like, I guess if you go way back and you thought about like, if I was going to go to school to become an attorney, right? Like I would have started on my path to become an attorney. But at what point are you the attorney? Is it when you are crowned the attorney, when you complete college and you pass your bar? Possibly. But in order for you to get to that point, I assume up until that point, you would have to start thinking, acting, and believing like an attorney, right? You'd have to be doing attorney things. People like us do things like this to get to that point. What's interesting, though, is that we're all kind of programmed to believe that like you have to follow a path until you are given permission to become a thing, because that's really kind of the way the institution works, right? Like go to school, try to become an attorney, pass the test. If you do well, you become an attorney, doctor, whatever you want it to be. Things like astronaut, though, are a little bit weirder, right? They're a little bit more whimsical because like there's lots of different paths to becoming an astronaut. But like, do you become an astronaut when you get into space and only when you get into space, or is it in the things that you do in the day to day, right? Because like I would argue that it's probably leading up to long before you get into space that you become an astronaut, right? And so I think that that's the nature of it, right? Because the very nature of what happens when you become just a coach is you decide whatever you're probably doing isn't working and you'd like to move into a new career field. So you pursue your L1 and you take your test, and now congratulations, you get to be thrust to the front of the class and now you're a coach. But that's not true, right? For one, like you're not actually a coach yet. We'll talk about that, I think, in a second. But what ends up happening is that people don't realize that even though once you're crowned or once you're given a title, it doesn't mean anything, right? Like there's a lot of really broke attorneys. There's a lot of really broke doctors. And so like, in the difference in those people is that attorneys either A, work their way up relatively well and get themselves into a big firm, make a bunch of money because the firm bills lots of hours, or they end up owning their own practice, right? And so they end up in that nature, and they're like, law school did not prepare me for this practice at all, right? And now they have to learn all the lessons, not unlike what ends up happening to most of you as coaches. So don't think that you're just a coach because, you're just a coach. Like you're about to learn the same lessons that even a doctor and attorney had to learn, because like at some point you find yourself being like, I need to either own the practice or I have to make a partner in the practice. And in order for that to happen, you're going to have to solve problems at a large scale so that you become valuable enough to get your name on the wall, right? So that all comes, though, from choosing the identity that like I am, therefore I'll become. And once that happens, you start to move towards those goals. But what ends up happening, I think, for most coaches, really, even gym owners, is that they're trying to solve problems they're not prepared for yet. And I think one of the big fundamental flaws in this, and we've talked about it enough times, is that most coaches aren't coaches. You're trainers, right? So you're trying to problem solve for a coach with a trainer's skill set, and vice versa. And you're going to have a hard time with that. But in order for you to think, act, and achieve at a level that you need to be at, you probably need to know what level of the game you're playing, right? And like that's really what we sought to achieve when we built out the MDCP program, was that like, in order for you to excel at the level, you're going to need to know what level you're on, right? Because you can't be trying to do like level 32 stuff when you find out you're actually only on level 12 or vice versa. So it helps to know like, where am I at in the game, so that I know what I need to excel at, what I need to achieve, so I can get to the next level and do well at that level too. And that was a big observation of us when we looked at the industry as a whole, is that like the name and the title is thrown around so well, people aren't actually really aware of like where they're at in their actual journey. Because like you've got coaches who are actually coaches who've been doing this for like 10, 12, 13, 14 years. And they're literal coaches. They're not teaching, they're not training, they're not speaking, they're listening. And you've got people who just took a test and they're only a couple of weeks into this, and like they've accidentally considered themselves coaches. It's not their fault. It doesn't make them worse. It just, they don't realize that like somebody gave you the title too soon. You still got to earn your way into that role. And that's why, HQ does a really good job of being like, you're not a coach until you get to like, the higher level. You're just a trainer. And somehow we get to the gym, and your owner, who thinks they're a coach, is not a coach. He's just a trainer who bought himself a gym, gives you the title of coach. And you're like, yeah, I'm a coach. That's like being told you're an astronaut, but you're a firefighter. Like you're not even going to remotely do coach things. You don't even know what to do. You're in the wrong field at that point. You've got to learn to get yourself to that point. That's my end rant. I'm done now.
Great chat. Do you like rumbling through my brain is thinking about. So when coaches, for example, and I know we spoke last week about, what is $1 million coach or creating, $1 million coach, and how coaches could have that potential, is when coaches begin to see themselves as entrepreneurs and having that opportunity to control their own revenue stream. So we spoke about them feeling like, well, I want more money, and the affiliate owner saying, well, earn more money for the gym, and then we can all work in together, and I want my coaches to help more. Is there power in making that shift to controlling their own destiny going to help in that transition from just a coach or trainer to being that next level of, I am a entrepreneur, I can create my own revenue, I can create my own opportunities out of thin air?
And so this effectively brings us to kind of where I was going earlier, is like, maybe the idea is why affiliate owners and coaches should consider themselves and act as entrepreneurs. And what we normally see is like coaches like, hey, I want to make more money. And the gym owner's like, great, I want you to make more money too. Make me more money, and then you can make more money. And they're both like, and like that's the fundamental breakdown, is that in both sides of the relationship, neither person is looking at accurately identifying, discussing, and solving problems.
Why do you think
that is a big difference in the role of being an entrepreneur, is the willingness to seek out problems to solve and to engage in creating solutions to those problems? Like, that's very, very different than what we normally hear when we jump on a consult with a coach or a gym owner that's trying to take it to the next level in their lives or their business, personally, professionally. They're like, but I'm just a coach, but I'm just a gym owner. And that is their subconscious way to absolve themselves of the problems that they have not actually sought out to solve, or maybe problems that they know exist, that they're just like, well, this problem just exists because this is a gym owner problem and I'm a gym owner, or this is a coach problem and I'm a coach. So it just comes with the territory. I mean, we hear that all the time, and it's super sad. Like, so many people are like, I just want to help people out, but people don't really love or value exercise a ton, so don't make a ton of money. But that's just, I'm a gym owner, and that just kind of is what it is, and I love what I do. Like, well, why do people go to surgeons in times of need? Oh, to save their lives? And is that priced fairly high? Yeah, okay, interesting. So like, your construct's broken. You just assumed an identity that absolved you of the ability to creatively problem solve and seek arbitrage opportunities. And so like, it's not your fault that these things exist, it's somebody else's. It's the coach's fault for the gym owner that there's not enough money. It's the gym owner's fault for the coach that there's not enough money. And it's like, well, it's actually both of your problems, because you're both fucking suffering. If both of you guys don't like the situation that exists, like, why don't you figure out what the actual problem is and actually work on solving it?
It's I was just thinking that, and it kind of brings us back to our eternal conversation in Affiliate about coaching and helping people discover their own creative solutions to their problems, and that all the other everyone's going for the quick wins in the marketplace, all the gurus and stuff talking about your problems will be solved if you have more leads, if you have more if you have more members, all your problems will be solved. When, this is the only conversation that I think has been missing in the marketplace. And there's one place where we're having it, which is, with our clients, is talking to them in that frame of reference. But it's, people are misled about what's going to solve their problem. And they go, oh, well, I just got 50 new leads and 20 new members, but I still feel like a shitbag. Like, I feel like I'm not achieving anything. And it's just created other problems, I guess, and it's not the magic pill that's going to set them free. My rant's over now. See, I've caught the ranting bug.
Look, it's contagious on this podcast. I don't really want to be one of those ranty podcasts, but most of these things are incendiary. One of the things that pisses me off more than anything is the sheer dismissive nature that people who are in possession of the tools and the resources to save and change people's lives, considering themselves anything less than absolute high level, upper level professionals because somebody hasn't given them that title yet, right? Like, because somebody hasn't been like, you saved my life or you prevented triple bypass surgery. Now you are super coach, right? Like, that's never going to happen because even at a basic level, if you take 5 pounds off of me, the things that you did for me are probably not going to be seen, felt, or otherwise appreciated for years down the road. But like, you're still just as important in my journey and in my mission and in my life story. And so the thing about being a coach is, for sure, it's very easy to get into, no doubt about it. And that's by design, especially from CrossFit's perspective. Like, we need more access to coaches, not less. So it's absolutely imperative that we give as many people the ability, the path, the pursuit is necessary to be able to try this thing on. There's a lot of people, though, who get through that. They're level 1, they're level 2, and frankly, they just don't get much further, and that's okay. But that, I think, also kind of muddies the conversation because, you know, a lot of people, when you hear this conversation, they start thinking about, like, you know, the Cindys and the Mikes who just volunteer their time because they took their L1, and then, like, you do share some space with those people. But, like, if you are a coach, that's got to start with an identity that is like, I'm going to be a coach, or I am a coach, and that identity is, I save lives, right? And that might be cliche and it might get thrown around a lot. And, you know, people might really kind of abuse it and overuse it because, like, there's some coaches who don't actually care about saving lives, or they just care about, like, body fat and Instagram posts. But, like, if you're a coach, you are definitely a unique breed of human, no doubt about it. If you're even remotely interested or drawn to it, like, if there's something that compels you to, like, I want to help other people, that is a title, that is an identity that is worthy of appreciation. Like, just simply being a person who's like, you know what I want to do in my life? Help other people. Because look around, that's rare. And I think as coaches, we spend a lot of time around other coaches and people like us, and it tends to diminish that to some degree. But if you spend time in pretty much anywhere else on the planet, like, the amount of people who want to help, who would even help if they were paid to help, is very little, right? Like, most of you guys do it for next to nothing, if not literally nothing. And while that might suggest that should diminish your title, that should actually elevate you, because the fact that you're doing it for nothing says something about it. Now, just appreciate the title and excel at it. That's all I care about.
Man, there's a Glassmanism that, like, we've talked about a million times that I only through this conversation have stumbled across in a different contextualization. It's that, like, that last line of world-class fitness in 100 words. We've talked about it in depth, at length, many, many times, because that helps people understand a better valuation of fitness. But what Tony was saying, that, like, mostly we just hang out with birds of a feather, and, like, it's a bunch of broke coaches hanging out with other broke coaches, bitching about how hard coaching is and how bad it is. And, like, it's a lot of shared stories and trauma. And, like, that's a big piece of how humans bond. Huge negative attention bias. We love trauma bonding. Like, it's just kind of a thing that a lot of people tend to trend towards. And you should work on resolving that, because it does not make your life any fucking better. But I would venture to guess that if most coaches went to regularly learn and play new sports, they'd be forced to encounter a couple things. If they did pursue coaching in another sport or activity, they'd be like, holy shit, these people don't know shit about fuck. And they're charging way more than I ever imagined that people would pay for anything. Like, we have a client that had sent a message in one of our mastermind group conversations that he's taking his daughter to swim lessons. And he's like, these swim lessons price out at $50 a week for one 30-minute session a week. And those of us who have, like, engaged in coaching and, like, service providing and other things are like, yeah, 0% surprise. But if your frame of exposure to other things that are kind of, you know, analogs to coaching and coaching fitness, it's just a bunch of other people that serve a bunch of other unlimited memberships at $150 a month, it absolutely fucking breaks your brain to think, like, why don't you charge like $150 for 3 30-minute sessions?
Yeah. And when you think about, I was just thinking about that as you said it, about most gym memberships, $50 odd a week, and that's for potentially up to 6 to 7 hours of classes and everything else that's thrown in as well. And you look on the flip side, like, oh wow, that's a big shift.
I think one big fundamental discovery question that I would have for every single listener is that, like, if you do find yourself as a coach, and unfortunately on the low side of the income range and maybe even like the volunteer range, but you'd like to make more money, all I simply ask you is, how much do you pay your coach? Therein lies the problem, right? Because 99.9% of the listeners are going to be like, nothing, because I don't have one. Right. So you don't actually value the service that you provide enough to actually hire somebody to provide that service to you. So it's not really that hard to understand why you would devalue the service that you provide if, like, you're not willing to pay for it yourself. Right? And I'm not necessarily saying that you need to have a coach, but, like, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just no real way around it, right? Like, and I think that's the important part of it.
I was having a chat on another podcast yesterday, and we were talking about the fact that coaches, need coaches, because having someone sit externally to you and shine a light on the things that, you would rather avoid. And if you don't talk to anyone about it, then nobody can see it, and you can just forget that it's there. And, I was talking about the most profound shifts I had both personally and professionally were when you guys in my coaching sessions raise things, and or I would raise it, and you're like, good, well, we're glad you did, but we've seen it coming. And if you didn't bring it up, we were going to bring it up. And it's because you can see very clearly just not being in the fire, you can step outside and see, and you need someone to call you on your own bullshit and your own stories. And we talk about that, how we tell ourselves a million stories to make ourselves feel okay. You need someone who's going to have those conversations with you.
Well, I mean, barring what it is that coaches do and why that thing is actually valuable, because for sure we've talked about that on like every single podcast, at least I think. But, like, if you were somebody who shines shoes and you did it for free on the corner because you just enjoyed shining shoes, right? But you came time for you to shine your own shoes, needed them shine, and you went to somebody and they said, $750, like, I do this for free. Why don't you do this for free? And see, that's the problem, right? Because your perception of the product and what you'd pay for the product is dictated by the product that you're giving away. And so it's not really a huge surprise. For one, most of us find ourselves in possession, of some degree of permission to coach, whether as a trainer, as a coach, and end up in front of a room of people as a class coach. And the problem with being a class coach is that transactionally, it's very different than being a PT, right? A personal trainer, in that, generally speaking, when you are a personal trainer, you are engaging in a service one-on-one, or a couple people, but one-on-one with a person who is paying directly and deliberately for that time. Therefore, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, however long I'm spending with you, they spent X, Y, Z dollars to be there. And for that reason, I'm going to give of you that time, that value, that worth. In a class setting, I think because there's so many people, it's lost on a lot of people that, like, they're also paying for that time. But because there's a lot of them, they're splitting the cost per class, per person. That cost is much lower. And then you find yourself in the front of the room without having that one-to-one relationship where there's not a real drawing of a correlation as to, like, what this class is worth. And therefore, it's very easy for you to consider that, like, I just do this thing, right? Because, like, it's fun for me. I enjoy it. But, like, you don't realize that those people are paying far more than even probably the gym owner realizes that they're paying for that class. And they're doing so because there's an expectation that you're going to take care of them. You're going to truncate time. You're going to teach them. You're going to help them. You're going to solve problems for them. You're going to do all these things. Most people find themselves in the front of the room being like, my job is to get this class done in 55 minutes to an hour on time with little to no injuries, and make sure that, the scores go on the board. That would be how most people would think of, consider, or, package what they do as a coach, but those aren't coaches. And that's, I think, where a lot of this gets very confusing. But those of you who are coaches who actually care about people, you're probably going to need to learn what to charge for your service. And the easiest way to do that is to pay for it yourself.
Mm.
I assure you, once you've paid a few $1,000s for a coach, you won't be working for a few $100 packages anymore. You'll be charging thousands of dollars simply because it will have changed your limiting beliefs.
Mm. And that is a powerful shift. And also once you start to be exposed to what, people who are, successful in the space are doing and doing well through coaching, you're like, oh, I'm not, there's so much untouched here. It's a big mind shift for sure. And it comes back to that old people like us do things like this. If you surround yourself with and put yourself in that environment and you have invested in yourself to be in that environment, so you're going to want to suck up everything you can, it's definitely more powerful than sitting around with other coaches bitching about how awful coaching is, because that's just going to make it more awful.
There's two types of people in the world. There's victims and there's heroes. Right. And unfortunately, most people choose to be the victim in their own life. And while that might seem harsh, it is true. But what they don't realize is that when you choose to be the victim, you're actually choosing to be the villain. So there's really only two people in life. There's heroes and villains. Most people are the villain in their own life. Choosing to be the hero requires you first to choose and accept that you've always been the villain, work to resolve that so that you can show up as the hero. And in most of these cases, it's much easier to be the victim, to be the villain in the coaching relationship than it is to be the hero and take control of it, to be entrepreneurial, to solve problems and take control of the situation.
And you see the breakdown and understanding that kind of deeper contextualization for the people that pay an enormous amount of money for coaching, get involved with like really high level humans that absolutely fucking crush it with shit on regularity that the earlier version of like this, person that we're talking about wouldn't even believe existed. But they fail to make that transcended journey themselves to either elevate their coaching or to like be able to use the tribe as a point of leverage for themselves. It's because they haven't accepted that like no one's coming to save you. You must become the hero. You cannot sit around and just bemoan the bills, the coaches, like the issues, like until you're actively engaging and being one's like, you know what? Fuck it. I don't like these problems. I choose to be engaged in solving these problems rather than just letting them be a fucking nuisance to my life. Then like, it's never going to change. And so maybe that's, introspective for anybody that's like, well, I've paid a bunch of money for coaching in the past and I've been a part of groups and, I still haven't found, the success that I'm looking for. Like, cool, dude. You're part of, a universal human experience and a fucking struggle, but are you actually seeking to be the hero that solves the problems for yourself and for others? And that's something to sit with. And there is only one fucking way to answer that if you do choose to be able to accurately assume the identity of the entrepreneur.
And you've experienced it. Everybody has as a coach, if you've done it for any period of time, the sheer amount of humans who will hire you in an attempt to abdicate their responsibility onto you, meaning transfer the responsibility to you and off of themselves, is staggering. You will see it all the time, particularly of interest in the nutrition world. If you try to work with people on nutrition, they would love to pay you for you being the reason that they're still overweight and they haven't achieved their goals, rather than addressing the behaviors and the root causes that are leading to it in the first place. And so you've seen it. You've watched people choose to be the victim. And a lot of people who hire coaches will do so under the guise that like, I want to be coached, I want to be fixed. No, you want it to be okay. You want it to be somebody else's fault than yours. And that's why a lot of people hire coaches. And sometimes coaches become coaches for that exact same reason.
Yeah, and I think I'm just reflecting back, I know that we've had conversations, in my coaching calls about, why do you enjoy being the villain? Why do you always write yourself as a villain in your own story? And I know that we've had some of those hard conversations and they were big realizations. And once I got past that and, that recurring pattern, which is still a work in progress before I get called out on it, it's still a work in progress, but...
Well, pause. We can all call each other out on it. We can all call ourselves on it because, like, that's the fucking game.
Mm.
And I am sorry to cut you off, but like, dude, I don't want you to internalize that or feel bad because like I think that like, and I know that you don't. Maybe like you is for the collective of like the listeners, but like at what point are you done being, you know, a CrossFitter? At what point like is it over? At what point are you like, you know what? I got all the fucking moves. I got all the strength, all the speed. I got all the skills. I got fucking quadruple unders backwards. Like, shut up.
Yeah.
Because even if you did, there would be something that came next.
Yeah.
And like, you know, it's fucking human.
Yeah.
You struggle your way forward, or at least you should. And maybe like that's the big thing for people to think about is like, if you don't actually feel uncomfortable in some kind of way that you're continually working on changing who you are, how you approach the world, the way that you consider things, look about things, the actions that you take, you need a coach more than anyone else. And I say that only as somebody who had like their own life transformed through coaching, because that was the thing that got me to step out of my own little fucking bubble that I existed in.
Yeah. So and it's doing that work is that powerful shift, isn't it? And being able to have that space where you can have the difficult or uncomfortable conversation, but understand that it's okay. Like, you know, when you guys are having that conversation with me and saying, you know, why do you always want to be the villain? It's not that you're like, hey, you know, stop being. It's not like it's a bad thing, but we're asking you this question to get you to reflect on it, and it's not that we're hating on you or you know coming down on you, but it's like we can have this conversation 10 times, but we're going to keep having it.
Because once you become a coach, you have the ability to see other people's potential and believe in them in a way that they cannot see or believe. And that is the transfer of belief that is a piece of the role. But
it's a powerful shift. And having that space to have that. And that's where I've experienced personally through quality coaching and quality relationships, the most profound changes I've had personally and professionally, which, you know, I would never have thought possible even 3 years ago.
Well, and like the framework of, you know, villain and hero is the same as the construct of like heaven and hell applied to the individual rather than the environment and the direction they're moving. But you're never done. Like you're never just in heaven. You're never just like, I'm a fucking hero. I only ever do hero shit. Like, no, you don't. Otherwise, your sleep would be immaculate. Your fucking headspace would be immaculate. Like your social circle would be immaculate. Like, no, dude. All of us have a million areas of our own life and our own story and our own journey. We're like, fuck, dude, I am being the villain and not the hero right now.
Yes. I mean, and I think back to the root subject of this and why coaches and owners are entrepreneurs is simple. The definition for entrepreneurship is essentially seeing a problem, imposing a solution, and doing so at scale. That's it. Obviously, in exchange for some degree of money. First and foremost, you're probably all entrepreneurs because most of you are individual contractors, not employees, and that's a whole different conversation. But the reality of the situation is that you solve problems at scale for varying different degrees and people, classes, individuals, etc. You need to do so. But most importantly, the reason why you must consider yourself an entrepreneur is simply because you are in possession of the solution to your own problem. And until you make the switch from business owner or employee or somebody who needs permission, opportunity will be stifled by that, right? And so you solve problems and you do so at scale and you do so at a massive level. You therefore are entrepreneurial, no doubt about it. Right? And that's really the most important part of this is that you guys solve your own problems by realizing that you are in possession of the solution to your own problem. And that is solving other problems for other people and doing it at scale. That's all you need to do. And you're already doing that. Just appreciate what you do. And if you find yourself, unfortunately, in a situation where you are not making, earning, or achieving at the level that you would like to achieve, know that you are the solution to that problem. Stop being the villain, start being the hero, realize what you do is important and it's immense, and then just do it at scale and repeat it over and over and over again until you're successful.
It's just that easy.
Simple,
not easy. I knew you were going to say that next. Well, I think that's a good note to wrap that one up. And I think that, you know, lots of good points raised and good conversation. But I guess at the end of the day, you know, get a coach who can see that you can be the hero of your own story. and don't limit your potential.
Make a decision on whether or not you want to be an entrepreneur. Like, figure out what entrepreneurship really is, and then decide if like that's really what you want to pursue.
Yep. All right. Thanks, guys. Another insightful conversation, and we'll see you on the next one.
Okay.
Thank you, my friend, for listening to the Fit Affiliate Podcast. If you would be interested in hopping on a free call with us to just kind of chat about what you think your problems are and what you think the gap is between where you're at and where you want to go, we can see if maybe we can help you along that journey, figure out if we're all a good fit to do some sweet things together. So click the link, set up a consult. Let's help you identify some problems that we can mutually solve.